We welcome you here again, and this group here will be your cohort. And I know a lot of you are like, I don't need a cohort, I've been teaching. But it really is, just speaking from experience, it's a different ballgame, it's a different world. There's processes, there's procedures, and there's a way of doing business in our district that's more streamlined than you might have come from. And so CHAMPS is part of that, so is word mapping and the decoding routines, which is what you'll be trained on after we do our grounding.
And we also want to mention this up front too. We recognize you have a lot of experience that you bring to serve the best students. They are awesome kiddos. I don't know if that was mentioned yesterday, but that should have been one of the first things that we mentioned. We have such great kiddos here in this district. And it's okay to ask for support. As a professional and as a mature professional, it is okay to reach out and ask for help. And so we want you to know that we are happy to help you. If you have any questions about the curriculum or the district initiatives that are maybe new to you, that is definitely what we want you to do. So let's think about one of your very first jobs. Every job we've done, every experience we have has helped to mold us into who we are today. And we're going to ask you to think about what are some of those characteristics that you maybe learned at your first job that helped you or is going to helps you as an educator. One of my very first jobs was as a nursing assistant, a CNA, when I was in high school. And I never really ever thought about that until we did this grounding, but I learned a lot of skills taking care of elderly patients that have really helped to mold me into who I am as an educator. Just a couple, for example, to help you think about as you think about your first job. I helped feed them. I helped take care of them as far as even bathing, and brushing their hair, helping take them for walks, and all of those are things I haven't helped bathe a student, but I have helped brush hair, I have helped feed and make sure needs were met in a nurturing, kind way, which I didn't realize would be happening as a teacher before I was a teacher. So those skills have definitely helped me to be empathetic and caring and kind, and I've carried that into my teaching career as well. So I want you to think about what one of your first jobs was, and think about a couple important skills that you learned in that job, and how are you applying that now as you are an educator. As we think about the jobs and walking around, lots of customer service was learned, how to be thorough, how to show up for the job, even though maybe it wasn't our favorite job at the time, but it has taught us many skills along the way. You bring that experience and wealth of talents that you have to our district, and we are so excited to have you here.
All right, well, we're going to get started on our network training. And again, our CHAMPS, our expectations. Our content is we're going to continue to process through the classroom management and discipline plan, that 5.1 plan. We're going to add some more pieces to it. We're going to have time to network with each other and share some ideas, things you've done already in the past, things you're planning on doing, so that we can all learn from each other, and we'll listen and respond to each other. One of the things we wanted to talk about was, why are we doing network, right? Like, you guys have experience. Our data shows, about 3 years ago, we started looking at data about teacher attrition. Why do teachers leave, or why are their contracts non-renewed? And what we found was that it was not just our college to classroom teachers that were leaving or had their licenses non-renewed. The percentage for our new experienced teachers was very high. And a lot of it is because you're walking into a system that, there's expectations, there's protocols, and there was no support for new experienced teachers. And I can tell you from my own experience, I didn't have a mentor, I didn't have support or training on district protocols, and it was very much trial by fire. And so we wanted to make sure that we were supporting our teachers who come to us with experience. And that's you. And so that is really what the network trainings are for. Some of you have teams of teachers that will be wonderful helps as well, but we also felt like there needed to be some more support. Not obvious at all. So, and the other thing is, how many of you have taught in an urban high poverty, high ESOL, high diverse district. Okay, so a few of you, maybe about 50%. So some of you, it's a whole new experience. You know, we love our kids. We are very passionate about teaching in an urban district, in a high poverty district. Very passionate about it. But our kids aren't always easy. And so we want to make sure that you have all the structures in place, everything you need to not only kick off and have a wonderful school year, but stick around and be with us, because that's our goal. We want our teachers to stay here. We don't want to lose our teachers. So let's get going. Go ahead and read this with me. When you treat student misbehavior as an instructional opportunity, you give students the chance to learn from their mistakes. So again, in our district, we have a proactive approach to behavior. Our goal is to prevent the misbehaviors from occurring. And then when they do, we have a positive behavior system in place.
All right, and that is so true, and that's been such a big learning for a lot of the teachers in our district as well as myself, and to stop and think, we don't get angry at a student when we have to teach them 17 different times how to read a short A word. We're not going to get angry at them for teaching them 17 plus times to stay in their seat, or to raise their hand before they speak, or any of those rules that we want to teach them. So it is a consistent, calm, fluent message for our kiddos. So let's take a look at this quote. We're looking at exposing our students to the best circumstances so that we can foster positive behavior with high levels of motivation in both good and bad students. I want you to think about that quote, and I want you to think about students that you've worked with in the past. I'm also going to ask you to pull back out of those variables that we talked about yesterday with Stoic, and you're going to be thinking about those variables as well. So think about a student and a connection to this quote on your past experiences. Consider the Stoic variables. Yesterday we talked about we are in control of variables. We're not in control of the students and what they bring. Some of our students come to school ready to learn. Some of our students come to school needing to be loved first. That is very true. We love them all, but some of them need some more nurturing and some more love on top of that. So we think about those variables that we can control and the best possible circumstances we can put in place for all of them. We control the structures, we control the teaching, we control the observing, we control the relationship pieces, and we control the consequences and those things that we have in place. So which of those Stoic variables came into place when you were thinking about the situation that you shared with your partner just a minute ago? From several of you right away at the front, I heard structure. Structure was extremely important. Raise your hand if you also talked about structure. All right, extremely important. Those are the things we can plan right now for. We can start to get those things in place and start to determine what we need to have. Did anybody talk about teaching? Not that particular instance. What about observing and monitoring? Interacting positively with relationships? Very important one. And what about correcting? All right, so structures and relationship building were the two important ones. As we're looking at beginning a brand new year, you're going to want to hit that off just like you have in the past. You're going to want to plan for those pieces as well with your students in your classroom. We're going to ask you to balance instruction with behavior. You need to do both. You need engaging instruction to keep our students active. We would like to challenge you to have the students go home more tired at the end of the day than you, okay? So that they're doing the learning, they're doing the work. And we also know that you need to balance building relationships as well as putting those structures in place. Two important pieces. Lots of balls to keep in the air, but those are the two most important ones to have a great start to your year.
So go ahead and locate your 5.1 behavior management plan. You know, and structures, that's what this is. This is all about structures. It's pre-planning so that we have those pieces in place before we even start the school year. So yesterday we talked about rules and we talked about an attention signal. The thing, also follow up at your building. Some buildings have a building-wide attention signal. So that's another question to ask today. Is there a building-wide attention signal that everyone is using? And then the champs and the expectation of whether or not they are posted. And so we want to just show you some different ideas from different classrooms in our district on how you might post. We talked about the posters that they have at PTR. That's an option, but there's other options. This is an example of a poster that someone made. One of the things is important is that you want to be able to, from activity to activity, address the champs. And the first few days of school, my method was we always address, if we were in direct instruction, I pulled out the mine were on a ring, and I pulled it out and said, we're in direct instruction, conversation levels of 0, if you need help, raise your hand, activity, whatever it was. There's no movement right now, there's nothing in your hands are out of your desk, and your eyes are on me. And along with that, we taught them slant, which we had not talked about yet. So slant is something you can also work with your kids. It's sit up, lean in and listen. What's the A? Do you remember the A? Huh? Yeah, attend on this, yes. Attend to the speaker. Knees facing the speaker.
The N is
Nod and nod. And T is, I remember. We'll have to check it out. I'm really sad I can't remember it. But I did teach it to my class, and I can't remember it now because I would just say slant, and they would all sit up, and they would all turn and pay attention. They knew that's what it was that they were supposed to do.
Isn't it track the speaker?
Track the speaker, thank you. Track the speaker. We can find that poster for you guys. But that goes along with that direct instruction piece. And then if we move to another activity, so maybe we're moving into small groups, I would go ahead and do that as well. And I did that all the time, and then less and less so. And then it got to the point where I only had to go back and use it when I needed to redirect. So I didn't have to call anyone out. I didn't have to embarrass anyone. All I had to do was go back up to the front. And and adults, it works with adults too. We've had to use it in trainings before with adults. We've had to say, just a reminder, this is a large group. It's really hard to hear when there's side conversation. Remember, our conversation level when others are speaking is a voice level 0. And so even with adults, it works. And it's just a nice way to say things respectfully and get everyone on track, because even as adults, we need reminders sometimes, right? So here's some examples. There's that one. Here's another one. This is one a teacher put all the different ways of talking on a row with the C conversation, and same with help. And then she just moves the stars to where her expectations are. In your Champs book, you have a DVD at the back of it. And in that DVD, and it also shows you in the back of your book, all of the pictures that you can use if you want to use them. So there's the menu, and then they're on that DVD. So you have those there as a resource, so you don't have to spend hours, going through Google and ripping off pictures and images, unless you want to. We do have PE teachers who use that in their PE classrooms. They'll use a picture of like Tiger Woods with the ref behind holding the sign that says quiet, things like that. So here's another example, just in a pocket chart, so they can move it. It has to work for you. You have to be able to manipulate it and move it, or you can assign kids. That can be one of their jobs. The kid who's not following the champs, that could be his job. Here's for pre-K. Those of you who are teaching pre-K, we use MAC, movement, activity, and conversation levels. This is one that they just took a binder and stuck it in a binder. This is very similar to what I used, and just were able to flip them. The one thing that's nice, though, about the pictures is you have those visual cues. So that's something to think about. This is from more of a secondary classroom. Here's another example. They made posters. This one is their bulletin board, and it has beginning instruction, group work, and on down, so that kids can just look down the row. So lots of examples of how these might look. And again, you might want to check with your administrator, what is their expectation regarding champs? What is their expectation not only with the posters, but also instructionally, so that you have a very clear understanding about what your building administrator is going to look for when he comes to your classroom, he or she.
You might be thinking, man, you're sure spending a lot of time on these champs. We get it, we got it, right? And I have to tell you that this summer I chose to have a summer job, and I worked for 7 weeks in our summer school program. And in my classroom of second graders, the kiddos going into second grade, I had kids from Kenya, I had kids from Afghanistan, I had kids from Sudan, Wichita, Mexico. Some were very limited English speakers, obviously had only been in our country for 6 months. And the visuals became extremely important. And so, as a reminder, we have many students. So as you get to know your kiddos, you will see sometimes the importance of those visuals as well. The big idea here is it can look however you need it to look. It is up to your discretion. The older I get and the more mobile I have to be, and as I'm moving from classroom to classroom, I'm getting real big about just keeping a space on a whiteboard and able to write it down real quickly. So I can real quickly, okay, see, turn and tell the kids what the conversation level is real quick, and just writing it on the whiteboard, and it's there. There are some other reasons for posting though, although I do believe our students are the #1 reason we keep them posted. But these are some additional reasons why they are important as well. Our kids can't remember everything. We're asking them to remember. And so we want them to have as much cognitive desk space as possible, ready to learn the learning part. And so this can help them to have that visual to go back to and to help internalize it as it's there and being posted on the wall. It can be referred to as a third point. Sometimes it's just another reminder for just a couple of students who might need to go up and study that chart and to just take some time to internalize it themselves and use it that way. It might not be all of your students. Visitors. It provides observational feedback for visitors. And when I say visitors, substitute teachers are my #1 reason of visitors to your classroom. I also do some sub-training, and posters that are posted and already in the room are extremely helpful to your substitute teachers, and they are able to just use them right away, and your students aren't having to learn a new routine from a substitute teacher, so that is there to help them. If you are co-teaching with a para, with a special ed teacher, with a ESOL teacher, which are all very common in our district, it also provides communication for the adults in the room, which also helps to have smooth transitions with your students and the adults. Gives that common language for your students and the visitors in your room as well as yourself, and it actually helps lowers the stress for our students. They know what to expect. It can help relieve that anxiety right away. And it communicates to our students a message that perhaps we haven't thought about this before, but if we are all using CHAMPS across the school, and we are across the district as well, we are in this together. Our students are maybe like some of our student, or my children at home, and playing me against their dad, right? Maybe that just happens at my house. But when we have a common language and we have something posted, it makes it much less possibility for that to happen when new visitors are in the room as well. So we are in it together, and it is a team effort to have that structure in place, and it has really helped our classroom management to be more of an easy transition to get focused on our learning. One more reason, expectations are posted around our life. It's real life. We want to teach our students to be aware of their surroundings, to look to see what is acceptable behavior about where they are at. Posters are placed all over. You'll see the quiet, maybe perhaps in the library, ring a bell for service, our traffic signs, going to the movie theater. All of those are expectations now, and they are communicated to us through a variety of visuals. CHAMPS is a visual, and we're communicating to our students so that we can have a successful classroom environment. We're going to move into encouragement procedures. So as you look at your 5.1, we're down at the bottom of the first page, and we're going to be thinking about encouragement procedures and moving on into that next area.
So some of you have already a huge menu of resources and ideas for building relationships that first week of school. And so On your 5.1 plan, what I'd like you to do is jot down what are some things that you've done in the past for building relationships the first week of school. What might be some things you want to try, talk to your shoulder partner. And a little bit later, we're going to add some more things to this, but a little bit later, we're going to actually do a process where we're going to be able to share with each other and get more ideas. What are you planning right now to do? You got the first 3 days of school, right, with kiddos? How are you going to begin building relationships with your students? Go ahead and jot some down and share them with your shoulder partner.
Another important piece when we think about encouragement procedures, you talked about yesterday with the I in STOIC, is the interacting positively and making sure that it feels like a welcoming environment. The power of a smile is highly underrated. Don't forget that you enjoy the job and take time to make sure that you're smiling, because all eyes will be on you in the classroom. They're watching your every move, and if you have a grumpy face or you're stressed out, they're going to feed off that, and they're going to possibly start to act that way as well. And so we need to make sure that that smile is always is there, and so that they are seeing that as well. So we're going to take a look. Every interaction is important, and every interaction will need to happen. You will have positive interactions. You will have corrective interactions. So we're just going to do a quick little activity to get us thinking about positive versus corrective. So you'll grab 2 sticky notes. And on one of the sticky notes, just draw a great big plus for the positive interactions. And then on the other sticky note, make a minus for the correction. So I will show an example up here, and you will determine if it is positive or if it is corrective. Teacher smiles at a student when he raises his hand to ask a question. Excellent, very easy. You've just given a positive interaction, and it happened in a split half second or even less. Teacher asks student partners who are talking loudly to speak at the appropriate voice level. Okay, we want to think about what our students are doing at the time. Are they doing something that we want to correct? Yes, so it's a correction. Even though we ask kindly and nicely, that'll be a corrective interaction. Okay? Always think about what the students are doing at the time, and that will kind of help you determine which one it is. Student is out of her seat at an inappropriate time. The teacher says, "Thank you, Carla, for walking quietly back to your seat." Positive or corrective? Think about what the student is doing at the time of the interaction. She's out of her seat. I want her in her seat. So it is a corrective. We're thanking her very kindly in a nice, polite way. One of my students this summer, we had to do that quite a bit with. And it can get inside, you might be going, I have said that 40 times today. But we're going to continue to build that pathway and continue to do it in a kind, respectful way, just like we would want our own children to be treated. All right, so let's take a look at this one. 2 students work out in a disagreement. The teacher responds, "Anthony and Gracie, please put 2 marbles in the jar. They worked out a disagreement without needing my help." That was some great specific feedback, wasn't it? Excellent job. Yes, definitely positive. Noticing, observing, and being able to give that positive feedback is exactly what we were talking about. Let's take a look at this one. "Hi, Tyler. Glad to see you today." Excellent. Very easy, positive interaction, non-contingent. Not based on anything, just the fact that Tyler's a human being and we are letting him know we are glad he is here. I know you talked a little bit yesterday about that 3-to-1 interaction and the research behind making sure that we are letting people know and letting our students know that we care about them, filling up that piggy bank. It's like a relationship bank. By the way, it's not just for children. It is years and years of research, and it also is used in marriage counseling. In marriage counseling, it's not 3-to-1, it's 5-to-1. Put those relationships and those deposits in. Then when you have a corrective between your spouse, you want to make sure that you are building those relationships back up and make sure there's enough in the bank. So it isn't just something that we work on with students. It is something that we work on with all of our relationships. And it's important. So it can be hard because you're balancing a lot in the classroom, right? You're trying to teach, you're trying to build relationships, you're trying to make sure everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing. Perhaps somebody throws up. You got to go take care of that. The phone rings. A visitor comes in, right? This is real life. And then when you're saying, what? I need to make sure I'm doing 3-to-1s? It's important. So there are some tips, okay? It's something we want you to be mindful of. You don't need to be like keeping a little chart on your clipboard or anything, okay? However, just some tips to be mindful of. Scan the room. If you're walking around, it's going to make it very easy for you to give some positive interactions. Looking at you and smiling and nodding, positive interaction. Great job taking notes, positive interaction. You kind of want to watch out and not do the get caught in the good job syndrome, because if you're saying the same thing to everybody, it's not going to mean as much. So kind of be careful and be specific if you can. And just kind of have that mentality. If I take that penny out of the piggy bank and I've given a corrective, and you're going to have to, we're going to want you to correct. Don't let it go. Just be mindful. Step back in. I heard, I don't remember who said it yesterday, but somebody mentioned that it stings when you get that correction. I don't remember if it was Renee or Alicia, but it does kind of sting whether you're, if my husband tells me something and I've done something wrong, it does kind of sting. I'll admit it. And it takes a little bit of time sometimes for us to, get those positive pieces back. It's so important just to restore the relationship and keep it in a good standing. This is a tried and true one. You've probably used it in the past. If Nancy is up here not doing the right thing, but everyone else here at this table is, I can try, you're doing a great job, and I can kind of go around and let everybody know I'm happy that they're on task. Perhaps Nancy just needs that kind of a thing and wanting some of that attention, and maybe she'll join in, right? We want to try that easiest thing first before we go to a correction. So try the easiest thing first. A couple more tips. Some teachers, because it's been a big focus in their building or in their classroom, some teachers put some kind of a visual reminder. Sometimes it comes more naturally to some of us to offer lots of positive praise and lots of positive interactions, and that's just the truth. And so some people will put a heart in the back, somewhere where they're going to see it, or some, I even have seen in some classrooms, a 3 and like the ratio, 3-to-1, and it's just there for the teacher. So if you're someone, you're like, man, that's just not me. If you need to make sure and give yourself a little reminder, that's okay. So that's one tip you could use. Some teachers have decided on a certain time of day or just to make sure they're checking in. Most of the time you'll know within the first few minutes of school, starting that very first day, who some of your special friends are who are going to need that extra attention right away. You'll know them right away, and you'll hear yourself knowing their name and saying their name quite a bit. And sometimes that's just a visual, like an auditory reminder too. If you hear yourself saying, Nancy, 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 get back in your seat, Nancy, do this, you might want to stop and think, oh, I'm saying Nancy a lot. Is it for a positive correction or a positive interaction, or is it for a corrective one? And just to be mindful of what names you're saying a lot of, because it will happen pretty quickly. And this is an idea to schedule a conference time if you are finding maybe Nancy is getting a lot of corrections. Maybe I just want to meet with her privately. We're just going to have a little one-on-one. I'm going to take the opportunity to get to know her just a little bit and maybe see if I can make a little connection with her one-on-one too. So that's another option. The intermittent celebrations you did talk about yesterday, and intermittent is, as you remember, every now and then celebration. We're not going to celebrate every time we have a reward, but it's just kind of a surprise. There are different structure levels. Some of our students will need very low structure. They come in ready to learn. You could just give them the assignment and they're just going to take off doing it. That's kind of a very low structure kind of a classroom. You may have one of those. You may have a more medium structure need classroom where the intermittent will work very well, and that might be all it takes, okay? They just need some rewards every now and then. They're going to be great. But you may find, as you are working with our students, you'll want to pay attention to some of those risk factors that were mentioned yesterday. High poverty is a risk factor. Special needs is a risk factor. Coming in from out of the country, we have refugees here in our district. That is a risk factor. Speaking English as a second language is a risk factor. Kindergarten is a risk factor. 6th grade and 9th grade are risk factors. As you think about those transitions, the more risk factors our students have, the more high structures they need. And I heard the recommendation yesterday was to begin with high structure. Do you remember that? So as we think about high structure, what that means is you need to pay attention to all of those encouragement procedures. Relationship building is a non-negotiable. The 3-to-1s you really need to pay attention to, and sometimes for some of our kiddos like Nancy, it might need to be a 7 or a 10-to-1, and you'll find that out, right? That will make sense when you're starting to work with those new friends. And then also with the intermittent celebrations, you'll want to add that in as well. So I want you to notice on that encouragement procedures on your 5.1, it says see Chapter 7, motivation, and Chapter 8, class-wide motivations. If you do not have a class-wide motivation plan yet, especially for our high structure students, you might want to check that chapter out. Compare it to maybe with what you've done in the past, because they are in that chapter. There are at least 17 different class-wide systems, and they are set up based on high structure, medium structure, and low structure classes. And so what you'll find out is you'll need that high structure class-wide motivation system plus. And what I'm talking about, like perhaps you use tickets, or perhaps you use points, or marbles, or whatever it is, that's a class-wide motivation system. So take a look at that chapter, compare it to what you've done with in the past, and see if there's something in there that you'll want to think about using. So I want you to, right now, on your 5.1 plan, take a little bit of time, and if you have a way that you are already using that you're thinking you're going to use it again for encouragement procedures or class-wide motivation plan, go ahead and write that down. If you want to take a few minutes to check out Chapter 7 and 8, and you brought your book, go ahead and do that.
We're going to talk about corrective procedures. What are the corrective procedures for misbehavior? And it could be misbehavior for early stage corrections, like we want to have early stage corrections, right? Kind of nip some things before it becomes a real problem. And rule violation consequences. And so we talk about correct calmly, the C of stoic, and we want to be calm and consistent. So what does that mean? And we want to talk about why that's so important. First of all, only 7% of what we say really is our communication. The bulk of our communication is our tone, our volume, and our speed. That's 38% of it, and our body language. So if I say, get that put away right now, versus, can you please put that away? It communicates something completely different. This is why there was something invented in the past probably 10 years. They're called emocons, right? Because there is no tone in those communications. And I don't know about you, but I've gotten a text or an email from someone, I'm like, oh crap, they're mad at me. They're mad at me. And they're not mad at me. There's no emotion. And so how we are speaking to our students is really important too. We also know that if we react emotionally, it can reinforce the misbehavior. For some kids, that's all they want, is to push your buttons and to see how you react, right? So we want to also consider misbehaviors a learning and teaching opportunity. A couple quick things about correcting calmly. You were taught this yesterday, the Q-tip. Who remembers what that means? Quit taking it personal. And I know a teacher who actually has a Q-tip taped to her computer so she can remember it's not personal. It's not about me. And that's very hard to do at sometimes. But so when we think about calm, we need to consider these. Are we emotionally neutral when we are correcting students' misbehavior? Some students love having that power, and when we do get emotional, we're giving away our power. So we want to stay calm. And we also want to reduce the chance of the heat of the moment that we might say something insensitive, right? When emotions get involved, that's when sometimes we say things we shouldn't say. We don't want to ever be embarrassing or hurtful to students. We always want kids to feel protected and safe in our classroom. And when a teacher says something harmful or hurtful to another student, guess what happens to the rest of the class? If I were to come up and yell at Nancy and say, Nancy, I can't believe you did that. What are you thinking? All the good kids, guess what happens? They go to fight or flight too, even though it was not them being yelled at. Yelling is not appropriate, okay? So that's something we also need to think about. And we need to act calm even if we don't feel calm. Right? Never let them see us sweat, right? Don't be afraid of the kids. You've got this, right? And then there's a great quote from a middle school student. Says, middle schoolers arguing with a middle schooler is like wrestling with a pig, and pigs love to wrestle. You have those kids who they like it. They like to get into it. Those are your future lawyers, right? They're going to argue with you about everything, but we want to make sure that we're keeping control of ourselves. And that means that we have to do some self-monitoring and be conscious. And I will tell you, there was times in my classroom, I taught 4th grade at Park Elementary, that I would come in that morning and just tell my kids, hey, I need to let you know I had a rough night or something's going on, and I am short on patience today. And I just need to let you know that. So bear with me today, and understand that my patience is limited today. So, and I have another friend who used to put on one of those vests that crosswalk guards use. So her kids would know, tread very lightly. So, we're people, we're human. And you know what happened? Then my kids would come in and I would have a kid say, hey, Mrs. Hopper, I had kind of a rough night and I'm not feeling so good. So I would know that child, had something go on, or they had a fight with their parents before they came to school. And that's just the human nature. We need to be sensitive to that and be honest and real about it, because that is the reality of life. The other one is correcting consistently. So we're going to echo read this. Research shows that it is not the severity, but rather the certainty of the consequence that stops misbehavior. So we don't have to have these huge, elaborate, severe consequences to stop misbehavior. What we have to do is do it every time. So what that means is that we have to, day to day, hour to hour, regardless of our own mood, we need to be consistent. And we can't let students get away with misbehavior because we're in a good mood, or because they're a good kid and they never get in trouble, and so we don't correct it, or because we like them better. We have to be consistent all the time. Using a sports metaphor, it's like offsides in football should be called whether the referee is in a good mood or in a bad mood, right? It's consistent. And when it's not consistent, what do the fans do? That's right. When it's not consistent, we're upset. So imagine you're stuck with an inconsistent referee every single game of the football season. And so we want to make sure we are not that referee in our classrooms.
Thank you. One more analogy there to go along with the police analogy we used yesterday is when we think about corrections, it's a parking ticket versus the firing squad. And it is the consistency that really is helping our students to understand what the behavior is that we want them to do, rather than the inconsistency. So in our CHAMPS books, there are early stage corrections that are these. If you do not have your book, these are some tried and true ones, probably ones that you have utilized, especially as we are greeting our students, teaching them the rules. We're going to really want to focus on some of these early stage corrections before we go to the firing squad, right? Also, we're going to want to put some structures in place in our classroom and not rely heavily on the office unless it is truly an office referral. And those are the ones that are cause for safety, harm, very much those tier 3 behaviors that will need support from the office. There are many things we can take care of in our classrooms. And many times those early stage corrections can help us right away. It's the pre-correction. So saying it up front, envisioning what's going to happen and pre-correct it before it happens. It's walking around, that proximity. The gentle verbal reminder is a beautiful thing. I always like to be gently verbally reminded when I'm doing something wrong, as opposed to getting that strict correction first. Having a discussion, go ahead and pulling a student aside to have that personal conversation. Family contact is an option. I probably wouldn't do that right away. I would save that for a little bit later. Humor is a good thing, but humor isn't sarcasm, so I want to put that out there and be real. Most of our elementary students will not understand sarcasm, so let's just make sure and be mindful of that. Again, praising students who are behaving responsibly. If somebody writes on the desk, we're going to have them clean it. That's a natural consequence. Okay, somebody throws something on the floor, we'll have them pick it up. That other student draws on 2 desks, I'm going to have them clean both desks. If they happen to do it again, I'm going to have them stay in at recess and clean all of the desks. You know, I'm going to kind of have a natural consequence, so the punishment will fit the crime, kind of an idea. So these are some early stage corrections that can help us to have some ideas in place before we move into our actual consequences that we're going to be talking about here in just a little bit. One more idea on early stage corrections. Here are these some mild consequences as we think about some things in place, and if you are thinking these are some great ideas, feel free to take a picture or write some of them down on that spot on the second page where we are at with correction procedures. These are some great ideas to have a menu to choose from, because not only one consequence will fit every single misbehavior. And I've been teaching 21 years, and I still encounter misbehaviors that I haven't had yet. I mean, you know, they continue to do something new or something different. And I'm like, oh, you need to have a menu or a list of things so that you have something to choose. And we're going to talk about that here in a little bit as we have think about a menu. In many of our elementary schools, you're going to have, there will be some school-wide systems in place, so you're going to want to ask at your building, do we use buddy rooms? What are the rules? Many buildings have done some work with Tier 1 classroom behaviors. You need to know what those are. And what I'm expected as a teacher to be able to take care of in my classroom. When do you want me to start asking for help from another adult? That's what we call a Tier 2 behavior. And then the Tier 3 will be those some people are really excited to be back to school. That's awesome. And then the Tier 3 are truly those behaviors that we will need support when it comes down to safety, harming, bullying. There's some top 5, and you can talk with your principal to make sure you get those specifics from your principal. So these are some great things, and the page number is noted there as well that you can take a look, and we will go a little bit deeper with those. When we think about a correction procedure, and I'm just going to admit that when I first started teaching, I would probably go more toward the firing squad, because I was like, I have told you that before. You should know the rule. You have just lost your week of recesses. Well, what that really ended up doing was punishing me more than the student, because the student oftentimes liked to spend time with me. And I really wasn't working on changing the behavior, but what I felt like I had to do was punish them. And I wanted the punishment to change their behavior. But when I look back at that, many times that didn't change the behavior. And so what we're wanting to do is really think and look at what is causing that. All misbehavior is communicating something. And so it is our job as educators to figure out what is causing that misbehavior. What needs are not being met, and what can we do to help support. In our district, we really work hard on problem solving and working together. We don't expect you to have all the answers, but we have a team approach to that. One idea here is, and as you think about a plan in place, you might have preferred activities that are a lot of fun in your classroom. Maybe it's a Friday fun activity, or maybe it's a game time, or it's a Go Noodle, which is a very popular activity. Whatever it is, and whatever works with you in your classroom, that might be a preferred activity that maybe you're taking away 30 seconds for each infraction, and that might just be keeping a tally mark. So they might lose a minute or so, and it's teaching them that it's going to be something, but it doesn't have to be the whole activity. And remember, it is that consistency, not the severity, that shows to change the behavior, and that's our goal. So sometimes that can be a shift in our thinking, where we want to take away everything because they should know better. But the truth is they don't know better, or they wouldn't keep doing it, or they're getting something out of that misbehavior. So we'll keep talking about that idea and how to do that, but let's focus on correcting. One thing that has helped a lot of our teachers is to have a sentence stem. And I found myself in this position this summer where I know all this stuff. I stand before you and I teach it to you, and then I found myself going, I'm going to keep you in wait a minute, I'm going to keep you in a recess? No, let's stop and think about that here. But a sentence frame is extremely helpful. I had my rules, I had my corrections posted, I had my encouragement procedures posted, but I forgot about that sentence stem. So I think it's important and I want to share it with you. If you choose to continue getting out of your seat, you're going to have one of these consequences. And we had a list in our classroom of consequences that had many of these things on it. And so whatever you did, I could choose a consequence. But that sentence stem would have been a good thing for me to remember this summer. I'm just going to be honest, I forgot about that. But it would have been very helpful. I'm not going to negotiate with you. I'm definitely not threatening you, because many of our students come from homes where I'm not a threat. They've seen a lot more threatening things than Mrs. Shute, and that doesn't scare them. So I don't want to scare them or threaten them into changing, but I do just want them to know that there is a consistent plan here, and that's what I want to teach them. It's going to be an observable request, and it's not going to be a new request or something that's going to come at them as a surprise. I'm going to teach them what my menu of options are, and I'm going to let them know that it will be one of those options, and Mrs. Shute gets to choose what that is when that misbehavior happens. We are going to move in. I know you have talked about rules, and as teachers who have taught before, you have taught rules before. I'd like you to go ahead. Was there something first? Oh, just a minute.
Yeah. We wanted to show you really quickly an example of the rules at the top with the consequences at the bottom. It's the classroom. One is a classroom discipline cycle, so they have this system. Be respectful, be safe, be responsible, be positive, and reminder 1, reminder 2, reminder 3, and then positive consequences on one side and negative on the other. And the other one is class rules at the top with the consequence menu at the bottom again, positive and negative. And the reason we brought this up is that part of our job too is we get emails from principals. Can you please come out and help this teacher? Can you come out and help this teacher? So last year, one of the things that Chrissy and I did was work with a network teacher who we didn't get this started till January. And she had struggled for a whole semester because she didn't have structures in place. And so we just want to remind you that these structures are important and that it will really help the whole year to go smoother instead of trying to start some things mid-year when habits have already been formed. And so that's an example of a display of rules with the consequences. So now on to consequences.
Thank you, Renee. And so I'm going to leave it right here on this slide. I'm going to have you pull out the canary yellow document that has rules, corrective consequences, and encouragement procedures on it. This is just a planning document for you. And if you have already done something like this in the past, we encourage you to kind of to continue doing that. However, if you haven't ever thought about posting and being transparent with the students about what your consequences and what your encouragement procedures are, it is excellent to be able to communicate to your parents. You have a plan to not only correct their students, but you also have a plan to encourage them, which as a parent, I love to hear that. I want to know that my kids are going to get both from their teacher and to hear both kinds of feedback. And so one thing about this that is actually very, very beneficial is you are not stuck in a step of you act out, I'm going to have you go pull your card. You break your pencil or something happens and you get mad, go pull another card. I mean, it's not that rigid step system that could get a child sent to the office and they have done maybe 4 or 5 minor things in your classroom. So you really want to kind of think about that because we've really worked hard on taking care of the minor misbehaviors within our classroom and within our own management plan because as Renee did mention, it does take away our power. Some kids have worked really hard and they are really good at knowing how to get out of a classroom. Like they are super good at it. And so you'll want to know what your plan is and how to combat that. So thinking about your rules, remembering from yesterday, we do want them to be specific and observable. The ones up here on the right-hand side, They were maybe in the non-examples yesterday, so just remember that. The one that has, be respectful, be safe, be responsible. Those could mean different things to different people. Some of us might have a different vision of what each of those mean. And so we don't want it to be a guessing game for our students, because if we leave it up to them to assume, they may assume wrong, okay? And then we're just going to be combating that. If you do choose to use them, I'm not the rule police. If you do choose to use one that's a little bit more ambiguous, make sure you spend a lot of time teaching what that looks like to you, okay? Don't just tell them. Make sure you're teaching it well. You're acting it out. You're doing examples and non-examples. You have looks like, sounds like charts, and you continually bring it back. So not the rule police, just make sure you're teaching it really well. So you are certain, and there's no question that your students understand what it is. Also have a plan in place for students that come in new. We have high mobility in many of our neighborhoods in the school district. You may be welcoming new students every week. You may be losing some every week. That's just the reality of some of our neighborhood schools. So have a plan in place for how to reteach those rules and how to keep those fresh, and that our new kiddos coming in always have them. So I'm going to give you just a few minutes, again, to think about your classroom rules. Have you thought about a possibility of a menu of consequences? Consequences that work for you, and also encouragement procedures that you could use. So we're not saying, there's examples up here. Keep hands, feet, and objects to yourself. That's pretty observable, right? That rule. And here's a list of possible consequences. And that's, I'm reading right off of this yellow paper. I could take 30 seconds. So if one time you're you're getting up out of your seat and you have your hands on Nancy's paper, that could be one infraction, right? That could be 30 seconds off. Or what I would probably also have on here is a verbal reminder. You can have verbal reminder on there. Some of those mild consequences from the slide before could also find your way onto this document. So this document was just a planning tool for you to help you kind of think through what your system is going to be. Really make sure you're ready to communicate it to your students. Make sure it's clear. How will you communicate it to the visitors in your room? So that is a good communication tool. If you're going into a brand new team, maybe share with your team, see what their ideas are, and if they're doing anything as a team as well. But it is a great communication and planning tool. We're getting ready to end our session with you. We do have a couple of important pieces to go through. We came around and handed out 2 documents. One is called Professional Responsibilities, and the other one is a Family Engagement.
So pass those out at your table. Make sure everybody has one of each.
We're going to start with the Professional Responsibilities. Tips and talking points 1. This is something important that we are going through with all of our new hires, so network teachers as well as classroom or college to classroom teachers are getting as well, just so you are explicitly communicated with about your professional responsibilities in our district. So we'll start off with technology etiquette, which is extremely important. You'll want to regularly check your email and returning them. Just make sure it's not during instructional time. Watch out. This is something, and if you're not coming from a huge district, you may not be as in tune to. So this is something you don't want to do. Usually we have a new teacher doing it at least once, and then people will come and run to them and tell them what they just did. But watch your email to see where it came from. You don't want to do a reply all, especially if it was sent to the whole district. And you'll know that if it says Z all, and it's in that bullet point. So if you don't want to send it out to the over 7,000 employees that we have, just be careful of that. Be careful of replying to all. It is only for school-related use. Our email is safe for 3 years and discoverable under law. So always be professional in your email. Always make it, if you are communicating with another educator about a student, keep it professional. Try not to use names, but communicate what you need to, but just always keep it professional. Monitor the usage during district and building professional learning. That is a huge piece for us. When you are at a professional learning session, whether it be in your building or, for instance, in a situation like this, we need you to make sure technology is put away if you've been asked to do that, because it's an important requirement for us in our district.
For professional learning and collaborating and communicating with others, in general, just behave like you have the last 2 days. Be collaborative, be professional. This is part of the Marzano evaluation system, which will be next week. You will get some information on that. That's part of our evaluation system, is being professional and collaborating with others. In-service days and district work days, those are not days for doctor's appointments. You really need to be there for the learning, so keep that in mind. And then just be open and positive, contribute, and then also confidential with student information.
All right, the next section is maintaining records and communicating with families. It is your responsibility to your professional responsibility to contact families. It is important that there is a balance of positive and corrections. We've talked a lot about relationships and the importance of ensuring that we are relationship building, and so that also goes for our parents and with our families, and keeping them informed of what's happening in their classroom, and picking up the phone every now and then, or sending home those positive notes, especially with our Nancys, and because sometimes that can just really touch a parent's heart when you've taken the time to really let them know what's going well in your classroom as well. So we're going to actually, because that fits into the family engagement talking points, kind of jump over there for just a minute. And just you'll see the bold headings there. So just a tip sheet for you. Thinking about what positive communication will you send home early and perhaps often to keep that communication going. Always be approachable. We are working in community service, thinking about some of those first jobs that some of you have had. That community service is extremely important. And again, just the smiling and welcoming parents and letting them know that it's a great place to be. If they're walking into the building and people aren't smiling or saying hi to them, it can feel not friendly, even though that it may not even be the message we're intending to send, but just to be mindful of that, especially as they'll be in our buildings here pretty quickly. We want to be proactive, so that's why we spent time today really talking about your rules, wanting you to know what you're doing so that you're going to be ready to communicate to them at open house night or meet the teacher night, so you're going to be able to have a plan in place. Always remain student-centered, always keeping about the student. We believe in a growth mindset very much in our district. We're going to meet our students where they are at, and we're going to continue to support them and figure out how to help them get to where they need to be. And our families are our partners, and we want to work together with them. And then use your resources and network. This is a huge district, and we are resources rich. We want you to contact your building coach if you have things you need support with. Contact district coaches like Renee and I. We are here to support you, and we don't know if you don't reach out. So please, please, please let us know if there are any things that you need help support with in supporting your students and your families.
And lesson plan, I'm not going to talk a lot about that, but we do have the agreed upon lesson plan. Gina introduced that to you yesterday with the instructional protocol. And on August 17th, we have a district in-service. Half the day will be in your building, learning about math programs and curriculum. And the other half will be at an offsite, meeting with grade level as a district and doing some purposeful planning and learning about the purposeful planning routine. So that's coming for you.
All right, social media. Social media is great. We just need to really be mindful of these points. Understand the difference between personal and professional presence. The district is watching. I don't know who is watching, but there are, I don't know, but seriously, I mean, there are people who are watching social media. If something is seen and you don't ever want to talk about a student or a team member or a staff member, that's just not okay. So that's kind of a yucky thing to have to end our day with, but we just need to say it. He talked about teacher attrition earlier. That's probably one of the #1 reasons people are let go. So be very, very mindful. Be careful what you post. Don't friend or follow students, and always be aware of your privacy settings and what others can see. Just remember, you represent the district, and we want to make sure and keep that professional too.
Yeah, if you're really mad and you need to vent, feel free to email me. I'll delete it. But we do have suits of slander and libel happening within our district, teacher against teacher, principal to teacher, and such. So just be aware of that. And the last is student boundaries. Don't give your personal phone to your students or text. Use other means and keep those professional boundaries with your students. And so in closing, we're going to leave you with something to think about. What are some things to think about that that you're most looking forward to during the first few weeks of school, and how might you ensure that you have a successful start to your new students in your school? And just think about the things you've learned today and start applying those. Last, you have some training dates I'd like you to jot down. These are training dates where this group, we're going to come back together. We're going to add some special ed friends, and we'll continue doing some learning around district initiatives and protocols. We'll also have opportunities for you to meet with curriculum, which is going to be wonderful. So as you get into your curriculum, as you have questions and you're wondering about things, jot those down. Be a great time to get them answered. Elementary, September 22nd and January 26th. So make sure you block off those dates and look for a flyer with a substream. And then the last thing is also we have letters trainings that will be happening this summer. Letters is a literacy training for educators. So look out for that flyer as well, and talk to your building coach. And then our emails are up there. Please contact us if you need support in any way. If you just want us to come hang out in the classroom and observe, whatever you need. We're here to support you. If you're not comfortable talking to a building coach and you want an outside source to come and work with you, that is what we are here for. And so feel free to contact any of the 6 of us. I tend to work with schools that feed into North High, so Park, Woodland, OK, Ortiz, and such. And Gina tends to work with?
I work with the Southeast High School feeder pattern schools, Adams, Allen, Beach, Caldwell. I'll forget some, but there are several. And but that doesn't really matter either. So if you see one of us up there and you just email us, we'll make sure that we come out and get some support and help. And again, it's only with support. That's support in a supportive manner. We're just here to help. So if you were working on your classroom management plan and you're like, hey, come check this out, we would love to do that. So thank you so much. Welcome to USD 259. Thank you all very much.